Don't dip the ball. Drop the body. I make shooting simple. Follow me. Like if you're going down the road and all of a sudden a car takes off and flies, you're gonna be like, wait a minute, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit, right? Well, when I see shooting, it's the same thing. I see all of those things as one, right? All of them are just one thing. But then when I see that there's something missing within all of those things, it's boom. It stands out like a car that just started flying.
I'm like, yeah, you see.
Josh, Kobe Bryant is the best scorer you've ever seen.
Point forward isn't a position. Point forward is a skill.
LeBron is bully balling his way to a gold medal.
Now, I'm all for winning. I'm all for being competitive. But you took it to another level.
All right, good people. Welcome to this episode. I'm excited to have my guy, the one and only Mike Dunn. He keeps shooting simple. Good to connect with you here and really excited to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. And we just, like we said, we just were saying 45 minutes from each other. So we'll have to get on the court sooner rather than later as well. Got to make that happen too.
For sure, bro. I think I ditched one of your. I think you invited me. This was years ago. You probably don't remember. I'll check the DMs, but I'm pretty sure I bailed on a 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. one of those ungodly hour workouts that you do. I think I bailed on one. I think you invited me and I bailed.
Now, I will say this though, you are not the first person to bail on a 5 a.m. training. So
I am not, and I won't be the last.
You know what I mean? Yeah, we'll not be the last. Definitely not the first, definitely not the last. This is true.
Let's start with when you kind of knew that shooting was your thing.
So I didn't really start playing until like 5th, 6th grade. And so I had played baseball my whole life. And I pitched. And I remember the first time picking up a basketball, and truth be told, like I could just shoot. It was one of those things where the first time I touched the ball, I was like, oh, this is not difficult to do. You flash forward now. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. If you watch anybody that's played any throwing sport, whether they're a pitcher, whether they're a quarterback, they can all shoot the basketball because that kind of finishing motion, the last part of the shot is all very, very similar. I've even had conversations now with people, through different clinics that I've done in different places in the world. And the coaches there within the certain professional organizations will say how if you find a kid from a country that has throwing kind of ingrained in the sports that they have growing up, they're more likely to be better shooters. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to me. As a kid, you start doing it, you see success with it, and it's like, all right, well, how much better can I get with it, right? And that was always the thing. So like any kid, just out there for hours upon hours, at first outside, and then getting the gym membership, and had the bug, man. Couldn't stop shooting. I guess you could say even to this day now. So still doing it, but in a different capacity now.
How is it that you came to realize that shooting was so simple? If you could just generally give me even the layout of what it means to you to keep shooting simple.
I think you only find the simplicity in it if you know it in terms of all of the complexities within it. So the only way you can ever make anything simple is to understand it on a really granular level. I'll kind of try my best to explain, like if I watch somebody shoot, and I'll try to be as detailed as possible. So if I watch somebody shoot, you start from the ground, and you'll hear that said a lot. Like, okay, how your base, your balance, right? But when I watch the players shoot, I'm immediately watching how do their feet connect to the floor. And I'm not just watching how their feet connect to the floor. I'm watching, if it's a right-handed player, I know that they're more likely to favor the left foot than the right. So I'm going to watch that. I'm going to see where the weight is. I'm going to see, as that ball starts to move, how early does the weight go to the knees versus go to the hips? And I know that if the weight goes to the knees, there's a good chance that the way that the ball is moving up top is going to have some type of pull motion, some type of direction change in it. And you're looking at all these different things. Well, now I'm looking at how the basketball is moving. Is the basketball moving in a way that the hand's going to get under the ball sooner rather than later? Or is it being pulled in a way that the ball is going to have some type of crazy direction change that's going to cause things to have to be more perfect at the top? But all this kind of starts from the bottom, and you kind of work your way up. And there's countless other things that you're looking at within there. What's the guide hand elbow doing? What's this, whatever you want to talk about. All of that right there is what you eventually get to a place where it's like, you can watch somebody take one shot and you see all of that, right? And so to me, like if I really laid it out, maybe it could be a checklist of like 60 things, and somebody would say, "Well, that's ridiculous." But it's like in life, like we wake up every morning, and whether we know it or not, we've created these checklists for ourselves when we walk out the front door. Like the sky's going to be blue. I know where my car's parked. I know that when I'm on the road, this is what I'm going to see. We create these checklists for ourselves every single day. And if something's out of place, well, then we see it. Like if you're going down the road and all of a sudden a car takes off and flies, you can be like, wait a minute, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit, right? Well, when I see shooting, it's the same thing. I see all of those things as one, right? All of them are just one thing. But then when I see that there's something missing within all of those things, it's boom. It stands out like a car that just started flying to me. You know what I mean? And so all that stuff becomes really simple in terms of how you start to relay it to the players. But that's kind of how I see it, and that's how you can identify things right away. And like, oh, there's the chink in the armor that's causing you the problems that we don't need, and let's figure out how we attack it.
Fascinating, bro. Fascinating. I appreciate you being as detailed as possible. I expect that, and I appreciate that for sure. Thank you, man. No, seriously, that's great stuff. Talk about where you felt like you the level you reached as a shooter, as a player. You're teaching shooting now, so like it never got away from you, but just talk about your experience as a player and where you feel like you got to or didn't get to as a shooter.
That's a great question. I became a really good shooter. And I could shoot. It put me anywhere. I'm gonna shoot. I'm gonna shoot it really well. But I reached a level or a place where the way that I was shooting it, I unknowingly had a ceiling on what I was doing. And so I remember like I played at Philly U at the time. It's Jefferson University now. And we played a tournament in Disney World, and played on a really good team my freshman year. So my first couple of years there, I don't know if you ever heard of the kid Tayron Thomas. Tayron was Division II Player of the Year that year. Like had a game down there in Disney where he scored 53. Also played with a guy there on that team. His name was Christian Burns. Christian Burns has played on the Italian men's national team. He's been a pro for years, was the Division II Player of the Year the next year. So I was on an incredible team of talent, even at the Division II level. And I remember my first game, I went out there and I was starting and I hit like 6 threes. I ended with like 28, right? And then the next game come out, same thing. And I remember talking to my dad and I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. Like in my mind, I'm like, this is easier than high school because I'm also playing with these guys that are just studs. And so I'm getting wide open looks. And I remember my coach pulling me to the side and he said, hey, man, I hope you enjoyed those 2 games because the rest of your college career is not going to be anything like that. And from that point forward, the space that I got was like less than non-existent. Like it was like you're on a scouting report now, and then everything changed in terms of how I had to do things. And the way that I moved the basketball for me was very, very repeatable, but it was slow. Like I couldn't understand how to speed it up. And even like talking to coaches and people, they're like, you just got to move the ball faster. You just got to move the ball faster. And then looking back, like where I'm at now and how I see things, I realized that the way that I was moving it, I just put a ceiling on myself because of how inefficient it really was in terms of the energy that was being produced. And so I don't think I ever got to the level at the college level of a shooter that I could have been had I known what I know now. And I mean, I had a year in college where I shot almost 50% from 3, and that's all I did was shoot threes. At least now, knowing what I know, at least I can pour that into other people and help them get past whatever is holding them up.
There's a connection between your hand, your wrist, like your body, the shot, like you develop even your eyes. Like isn't there a connection like with the basket itself when you shoot it and you know it's going in? Like there may be no better feeling in basketball. And I'm talking about even if you're just right there close to the basket or a free throw or what, just like when you let it go. That's why Steph turns around when he knows it's because it's like it's such a good. It's like you know the feeling, right? Like you know what you've shot it so many times. You know what it feels like once it leaves the fingertip. You're that one's good. That one's good, and it's literally the best feeling. Talk about that kind of connection.
I would say that feeling happens before that ball even leaves your fingertips, because the better you get at it, the more the ball becomes a piece of you, right? And I think that's the way to look at it. Like, a lot of times we look at the basketball as this separate thing, right? But in reality, we're trying to make that a piece of us, because if we make that ball a piece of us, well, now we control what that ball is going to do. And I think that's a huge thing for players to understand, because so often the basketball is introduced into the equation and players don't know how to use it to their benefit in terms of how they create energy. And so when you start to learn that, then it's like, no, this is just an extension of me. This isn't a separate thing now. Like, once this ball is connected to me, it's connected to me, and I control it. Like, I tell players all the time, like, they're shooting and they don't understand maybe sequencing or something like that. I'll just put the ball down on the floor and I'll say, how much energy does that ball have? What can that ball do right now? Does that ball have the ability to just hop up and go in the basket? And they're like, no, it doesn't. I said, so why are you giving it so much power? Why are you moving around the ball versus you having that ball move as a piece of you? And so when you start to understand that, I would imagine that a guy like Steph, um, that ball is just an extension of him when he connects to it, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, of course he can do whatever he wants to do because he's in control of his body, right? And that ball is just an extension of that.
You talk a lot about, going back to the word connection, you talk a lot about connected. That word comes up a lot in your content and in your videos. Go talk. What are some of the elements of like being connected from a mechanic standpoint that you like to emphasize?
So it's really interesting. My mentor and the guy that has taught me so much, Rob Fodor, the first time I asked him this question because he would talk about connection. And I remember him saying, he's like, well, there's three parts of connection, like an obvious answer, right? He's like, well, Mike, of course, there's three parts of connection. Like, this is what we all grew up going to camps, and this is hearing, right? Not knowing. Like, Rob's amazing. He's a mad scientist, like smart, maybe the smartest person I've ever talked to. Like, not just in basketball and everything. And he's like, well, there's the connection to the floor, the connection to the ball, and then the way that your body connects to your body. You have the connection to the floor, which is how your body actually attaches to the ground. I think in martial arts they call it like finding your root, right? Finding your roots. Um, this is huge to me. It's one of the most overlooked things. But balance is a big time buzzword. But if people are actually balanced, or they think they're balanced, that's a different question. So how you connect to the ground has to do with, one, how is your foot actually attaching to the ground? Growing up, I heard get on the balls of your feet. That was the biggest thing. But if you actually want to take advantage of how you're actually really able to solidify yourself and then be able to push off of the ground, the more foot coverage you have on the ground, the better. Now, the way that you do that, you have to actually learn how to sink into your hips versus just putting all the weight to the knees. Because if you put all your weight to the knees, right, that's a big thing, bend your knees. Very first thing that's going to happen is all your weight's going to go forward. All your weight's going to start to go that way. And as a counter to that, we end up pulling the ball back. But our connection to the floor, sit into your hips, keep a full foot connected to the ground, because now you've actually solidified a foundation that's going to allow you to move the ball in a way that none of you moves, right? And that becomes a really, really big thing. So that's our connection to the floor. It's not saying that we're going to stay flat-footed. It's just saying for maybe 0.2 seconds, you get that full foot connection to the ground that gives you the chance to start to move the ball up the body in a way that nothing else is going to move, right? Because that connection allows you to drop the weight straight down vertically to then send it straight back up vertically. And the more we can do that, the more power we're going to be able to start to generate through the ball. So that's connection number one to the floor. Connection to the ball is what you would think. How does your hand connect to the ball? Where is the ball in relation to the body? So hand connected to the ball, for me, the more coverage of the shooting hand on the basketball, the better. Um, Growing up in camps, they would say, oh, you need a gap, you need this, you need that. I never use those words, because if I can get a player to understand this is how we're actually going to put our hand on the basketball, there will always be some type of space just due to how the hand is constructed. But I'm not going to force space. And I don't believe that anybody is a palm shooter, because no one actually shoots with their palm. The ball is always going to leave your fingertips last. I think it's just it's a blown up thing that like gets likes on social media. So everybody likes to talk about it, but it's actually really simple. The distance that the ball is from the body or the ball to the body is a big thing because the further out the ball gets, the less that ball is a piece of you now, right? We talked about that ball becoming a piece of you. So if that ball is stuck out too far away from you, well, then the way that we're going to have to move it to get to a point of leverage up top at our set point is going to be a backwards movement with a really harsh direction change. And so a closer connected basketball and then understanding how to lead with a push up to the two motion gets the hand under the ball sooner. And then there's always going to be direction change in the shot because we're not robots. But it allows that ball to move in a way that there's going to be direction change, but direction change that still serves in contribution to where the ball is going to go. And then the last thing is how your body connects to your body. And then I'm always still kind of learning that aspect of it. But I have, for me, the biggest piece is that, if you're set up in your position, you don't want elbows flared all over the place. You kind of want to bring those elbows in, kind of resting along your sides, so that, you're connected to yourself. Because if your elbows are flared down low, chances are the way that you're going to have to move that ball is going to be like a pulling the ball up the body. And that's the last thing we want to do. So it's a very long-winded definition of connection, but it's, again, like coming back to what I said in the beginning, you see that or like I see that the very first shot somebody takes, right? So you're seeing all of it together, but all of it does really, really come together really nicely as you start to get into it more.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. That's great stuff. You brought up the word robot, and it's funny. I saw there might have been a recent video you did, might have been on your story or something, but you were talking about how, and you said being robotic is almost a necessary step. Talk about that balance between feeling like you're a robot and being a little more flexible, which you obviously have to be playing the game.
If I have a player that says, "Hey, this feels robotic," I'll say that means that we're on the right track right now. Because one, it means that we're doing something that you've never done, and you're only with me for a reason. Like I'm in a really unique place, and that the overwhelming majority of people that I come in contact with really need help, like really need help. So I'm like, okay, well, that's completely what we're doing here is completely different from other things that you've done. So yeah, it's gonna feel strange, and I want things to feel robotic because I want you to understand these certain moments in time right now, because these moments in time are moments in time that eventually you're going to be able to pass through and not be robotic anymore. But in order to build the habit, you have to understand these points in time. You have to understand how the body is situated in the beginning, how the ball is going to move, what checkpoints it's going to hit. And then the better you get at that, the more, like we talked about earlier, like you become yourself, right? And so it's one of those things where understand the principles. I said form to become formless, form to leave form, principles to leave principles. Like understand the principles on such a deep level that the principles or whatever you can think of that as the roboticism of it, but understand that leads to a path of extreme freedom. Even like when we learn language, or if you're learning a new language, you try to piece together a sentence. It sounds so bad, right? Like I just got back from Spain and I'm trying to order food and I stink at it. But I would imagine that if I'm in that country for 2 months, 3 months at a time, and I start to pick up on it, I don't sound like a robot just spitting out inputs and outputs anymore. I probably will start to put things together. Everything's the same with that. You know what I mean? We just don't look at that as like, oh, I'm talking like a robot. No, we just, but that's kind of what shooting is too. It's you're understanding. Okay, starting to understand. Okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. All right, all right, all right. Well, now can I start to flow through this, right? And then again, now you start creating your art within it.
I never would have known what having a connection with my body, my fingertips, my toes, my hamstrings, my fascia, my lower back, my whole, like, I never would have, like, people talk about have mind body connection. I never would have had any concept of what that was without yoga, and getting a concept of it literally gave me more freedom.
It's amazing how things like that, like, I think that there's so much to be gained from things like yoga and things that bring that mindfulness to everything, and how you just like it just spilled over to basketball, let alone all the other parts of your life, right? That's so cool to me. I've been reading a lot about yoga. I just haven't done it. I need to do it though.
Mike, you've been reading about yoga, but you haven't tapped in yet.
Yeah, like I'll read Sadhguru's books and about yoga and how he sees yoga as he doesn't see it as an exercise. He sees it as all a mental activity, right? All for the mind. And what you just said there is, I mean, that hammers home the point. It's actually getting familiar with the mind so you can feel everything else. You know what I mean? He always says that we've kind of glorified it as this, you know, go in the room and put yourself in these tough poses and all this stuff. But really, it's a mind, it's an awareness type of deal.
Getting to know yourself, which things like mindfulness and yoga can help you do. It's really incredible how that translates into getting to know your game and then being able to develop your game from there. Like it's really crazy.
Like what we were just saying, like that's the same with everything, right? Like if you don't know yourself, like if you don't really know who you are, how are you ever going to put forth the best version of you, right? You're trying to put together like what you think is, but it's not really the authentic you at the end of the day. So it's really, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying there.
How would you kind of describe the balance between, I don't want to say tightness or tension, because obviously you don't want to be tense or tight shooting the ball, but I guess just almost like just locking up, like feeling like you have to have that control, like strength, the balance between that and relaxation. Because I'm constantly telling players, yo, like start to relax your shoulders when you shoot. You know, you just see them so tensed up, and it's like, yo, ease it down a little. Like you can just tell it needs to be relaxed more. But there's a balance, because it's like you can't be. It's like they tell me in meditation, like if you get too relaxed, you're gonna fall asleep. But if you're too focused, your mind's gonna go crazy. So it's like if I'm too tense, there's no way I'm shooting the ball smooth. If I'm too relaxed, I'm shooting air balls all the time. So how would you describe kind of that balance?
I see the tension in the body a lot of it happens to me for the overwhelming majority of things. It happens with how they connect to the ground. And so when a player connects to the ground in a harder way, right, a more aggressive way, the harder you connect to the ground, like if I tell you to slam your feet into the ground, what does your whole body do? Your whole body tenses up. You don't slam your feet in the
Yeah.
ground and relax, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a direct relationship to the feet and the hands. And those are the two things that need to be able to relax to be able to move the ball the most efficient way. So when we start to understand, like we start the connection to the floor, the big thing we do is we learn how to drop. We learn how to become weightless in a sense to turn ourselves like into a spring. And when we do that, that relaxing, we drop, our whole body just kind of goes, right? We just let ourselves fall. We get to the bottom. Our hands are in a great place. We know how to move the ball from there. That's a big piece of it too. And now because the feet are relaxed, the hands are relaxed, and now we can just get that ball moving so fast, right? So fast, but so controlled. So yeah, it's a big thing. I see a lot of players that get really, really tense, but I would say the overwhelming majority of things with that are fixed with just getting them to understand, look, this is how you should connect to the floor. Because if I connect you to the floor, that's the first thing that's going to happen. It has to happen with every single player, with every single shot. We're going to use the floor, right? So let's use it to our benefit.
I tend to think of again, it's shoulders and hands and wrists. You know, but the feet, as we know, everything starts with. But for you to emphasize the connection, the feet connection to the ground, as far as establishing that relaxation versus tension, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought of it that way.
If you think about, like, if I put you in a stance and you're holding the basketball, and I said, okay, well, now I want you to put all the weight to the toes and to the knees, right? Like all the weight's going to go there. And if you can, like imagine what your hands are going to do in that scenario. All your weight's going forward, right?
Yeah.
So what your hands are going to do is you're going to start to probably pull the ball backwards to counter where the weight's going.
Yeah.
And so with that right there, it's really hard to be relaxed in that. But if you learn to stack the weight and then just let the weight fall while keeping the body nice, stacked, but still athletic, that takes you just down. It just takes you down a level and then allows you to keep everything nice and connected, to use that word again, on the way up. There's no extra movement anywhere. That's why that connection to the ground is just so important.
What was like an aha moment for you as a shooter? Was there a drill or a moment or a piece of advice from Rob or something? I mean, what's an example of an aha moment that you had?
It would be the whole idea of sequencing, like actually understanding the order in which things have to happen. And you mix the idea of sequencing with everything we talked about connection. So sequencing being This has to happen to allow us to take advantage of everything else. Like I said, like you're in control. You're the energy machine. When Rob started explaining sequencing to me and when I started playing around with it, I was completely mind blown by it. Like I tell players, you have no idea how powerful you are because you don't understand sequencing. But the moment you understand it, you're going to see not just how powerful you are, but how much you can control that power as well. You get a player to understand sequence. I mean, shoot, I got NBA guys now. They're still like every day. They're trying to get it. You know what I mean? They're trying because they've gone so much in a different direction over time. Um, but that's the biggest. If you understand the order in which things have to happen, I always tell players, you write your story. That's the big thing. I have built an online academy of sorts for dedicated to shooting. I work with players all over the world. I work with players in the United States. I work with players in every country that you can imagine. I work with beginners. I work with weekend warriors. I work with NBA players in there. Um, I just love to teach. I started on January 15th, 2020, and I have not missed a day since in terms of responding to people every single day that I've done it. Um, I absolutely get a rush from teaching people how to shoot. So it's a shooting program that's unlike any other shooting program, just because you're getting real direct feedback from me as I take a look at your video, and we're texting back and forth. I'm sending voice notes, like all that kind of stuff. It's not a program where I just give you a cookie cutter program and I say, here, you figure it out. I I love what I do. And and so if you are somebody that really wants to learn shooting, um, man, then I'm your guy. I believe in that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will show. So if you think you're really ready for it, then I would love to work with you. So Keep Shooting Academy. Go check that out.
Loaded hands with the forearm pointed down creates more of a pull backwards. Loaded hands with the forearm parallel to the ground helps create more of a push up. I make shooting simple. Follow me.
You talk a lot about energy, and I know I know there are different elements to that as far as like physical mechanics and whatnot. But just stepping back, just even how we just talked about the game, and how important we know energy is just in life. You're a dad, you're a husband, you need all kinds of different energy on a daily basis. But just talk about how important energy is to you.
It's super important, man. Like it's important in the shot because without energy, the ball doesn't get to where it needs to go. It's important in life because without it, you don't get where you need to go, right? And so, are you doing the things on the court in terms of the shooting side of things? Are you doing the things that maximize your ability to transfer energy from your body into the ball, the connection, the sequence, that kind of stuff? In life, are you doing the things necessary to maximize your energy output? And that goes with who are you hanging around? What are you reading? What are you watching? Like all of that stuff plays such a huge role in the energy that you're able, to bring to the table on a daily basis. It's such a big thing, man. I'm starting to get more into that, like the vibrational side of things and all that kind of stuff. And I think that stuff is so real, man. Like it's like if I'm thinking big, if I'm thinking in this really positive type, hey, everything's work, like this is great type of way, amazing things happen, man. Amazing things happen. So I believe in that. I believe in that big time.
People who talk about like kids who go in the gym and just start chucking up threes. What's your counter to that? What do you suggest that players do instead of that?
Yeah, so I think you can make it super simple for yourself. Like let's say that I just gave you the most basic shooting routine to do of all time, right? Like there's going to be game shots in there, there might be some spot shots in there, whatever. But at least you have a routine, right? At least you have something that's going to say, okay, this is what I'm going to go in there and do. And that, like, to me, that's a very important thing because if you're just going in there and mindlessly doing something, you're probably not going to get anything done. Now, the toughest part is while you're going through that, how concentrated, again, can you be on your own personal checklist of things you need to get better at? We could do off the catch and shoot, and one dribble pull ups. We could do that for a straight hour. And from the outsider's opinion, they can look at that and they could say, oh, he's doing the most basic thing in the world. But what if you're actually that dialed in that you're saying, okay, well, when I'm going off the dribble, I'm focusing on how I'm dropping my hips. I'm focusing on the dribble foot connection. I'm focused on where are my hands? Are they moving in front? Are they behind? Am I getting back to my one before the second foot hits so the ball can move in sequence? There could be so many different things going through your mind that you're working on that the outside person would have absolutely no clue. And to me, like that's where you want to get to. You want to take the most simple things, but have such a detailed understanding of what it takes to perfect that, that the most basic workout in the world can be really like the most mind-blowing one for anybody that would really be willing to listen to what's going on. So you just have to know you. You have to know you and what it is that you have to get better at. You could put any routine around it because if you're focused on the pieces that you need to get better at, you're going to get better. That's the way it's going to go.
For players who experience a hitch in their shot, in your experience, where does that come from and how do you attack fixing that?
Some hitches come from a mental hangup, 100%. Okay, I've seen it. I've been on the court with that. Other than that, most hitches come from not understanding the sequencing side of things. So it's like we talk about, like if you walked outside and all of a sudden, like we said, the flying car takes off, and like, oh, that doesn't make sense to go there. When I watch a player with a hitch, it's the same thing. They're out of order, right? They're moving things in a way that is not allowing them to transfer energy as effectively as possible from their body into the basketball. And so it's just about identifying, okay, where is that happening? Where's that energy leak happening along the way? And then, okay, there it is. Now let me get you to dial this back and understand, look, that hitch is happening because the first thing that moves on your shot is your shoulders, right? If that shoulders move, that means your body's on the way up. And now that ball's on, now that ball needs to find its way up. Well, because your shoulders move first, we just lost everything from our legs. So now the ball still hasn't gotten to a place where it can actually do something at the top. So you're forced with you're left with two things. You can either just get rid of it, or maybe we can just keep pulling that ball back so you can find power somewhere else. Like you can break it down. You'll see it. Like every situation is so different, but it's almost always a matter of not understanding sequencing. There's that word, man. You understand sequence, you are golden, period.
Probably one of my biggest points of emphasis that I teach as a trainer, shooting off the dribble. And I saw a great breakdown you did the other day or recently on Bronny's jump shot on a pull-up jumper he had. The fact that he got the pull-up off so quick had to do with he got his hand to the ball before his foot landed, if I have that right. Could you expand on that more?
What's the highest percentage shot in basketball that's not a layup?
The free throw line.
Free throw line, right? Do you ever see a player at the free throw line that's a good free throw shooter put his hands on the basketball the very last second before it moves up to the shot? Or is it always present in their hands?
It's always there.
It's always there, right? So our goal is to get to this place where no matter what shot we shoot, we don't turn it into a free throw, but we turn it into the principles that allow us to be such good free throw shooters. What happens is if you're going off the dribble, when the foot hits, we like to make our pickup at that same exact time. Where that becomes problematic for a lot of players goes into the sequencing side of things. So like I was saying earlier, the biggest revelation for me has been sequence. When you watch a player shoot shots off of the dribble, a lot of times what happens, they're moving so fast and then they have to stop on the dime and they have to elevate into space vertically. The basketball almost becomes the afterthought because they're so worried about getting off the ground. And so what happens is the shoulders start to rise before the ball has had a chance to move. And if the shoulders start to rise before the ball has a chance to move, now we're playing this game of catch up at the top, where now the ball has to almost be pulled up, even if it doesn't look like it. Russell Westbrook's a great example of that. When he shoots mid-range shots, he gets off the ground so fast, but the ball's kind of lagging, and he gets that big stop at the top. That's why Russ would be on one night, off the next. That clip of Bronny is so interesting because at the level that he's now, especially like where he's going to have to play at, every single fraction of a second means so much. And so his ability to move with the hand in front that's not dribbling gives him the opportunity to get hands on the ball. And then as soon as that foot hits the second foot, that ball can lead him up into space. When we think jump shot, We think you think jump and shoot, but really it's move the ball and then jump. The ball is what leads us into space sequentially. So if the ball can move up first, we give it enough of a head start, now the body can flow up under it, and we're in the same exact rhythm of any other shot. But we can't do that without the basketball. And it's really hard to get players to do in the beginning, because if you think about like when we're walking around, if I'm just walking, my right hand goes forward, but my left hand goes back, right? So whatever step we take, we're always used to putting that hand in back of us. And the longer that hand stays in back, the longer it takes for the hands to get on. And now we've lost that fraction of a second. There's a really cool clip of Kobe talking about this years and years ago. He was even talking about the defensive side of it, and he's just saying, like, if I'm playing somebody and I see that hand goes back, I pin my hand to them, because now I know that hand can't get back to the ball. And it's like, yeah, duh. Like, of course, like you see it and you're like, of course, right? And so learning to move with the hands in front does multiple things, but the really big thing that it does is it's going to allow you to sequence correctly almost every single time. And that sequencing at that level, that especially like Bronny's at now, dude, that's so big. I have so many saved clips of players doing that and getting off shots that no other human being is getting off, because their preparation's so good. It's so good, it's unreal, and it has to be at that level. But why not take that mindset into a seventh grader? Now you got a seventh grader doing it, and they're making things look like it's the easiest thing in the world.
Go into some of those things that you do see the high level shooters do, and who are those high level shooters? Who are the best shooters that you that you still study now and like to watch and take notes from, and what are some of the common denominators or even just unique things to certain shooters that you love to point out?
I love Steph's evolution as a shooter. I love the fact that if you watched him at Davidson and then you watch him now, his shot looks completely different. And so you watch him at Davidson, there was a legitimate stop in his shot. When I say legitimate stop, I know that like a lot of people won't see the stop. The stop is there. There's a stop in his shot at his set point, versus now where he's now just moving through it, right? The work that you have to do to be able to move the ball like that man moves the ball is insanity. Like, his level of mastery exceeds like I think. So when people's like, oh, yeah, but Steph does this, it's like, no, stop it, dude. Like, you're not willing to do what Steph does. There's no, like, I know that just by that sentence, Steph does this, so I'm going to do it. Dude, you're 16. Like, you think you're going to do what Steph is doing right now? Like, that's absurd, right? So watching him is amazing. I'm going to use him as another example. When he comes across, he'll play with the ball. When he's in I'm hunting a shot mode, watch him when he comes across half court and where he puts his dribbles, because he doesn't play with that ball. He puts that ball right next to him. It's almost like his elbow's attached to his hip, and he's pounding that ball while he's searching for space, going behind screens, so that the second that somebody messes up, doesn't hedge out on a screen, doesn't fight over it, boom, that ball's out of there, because the ball's a piece of him. Just like on the shot, the ball's a piece of him on the dribble. Like, stuff like that is like, I watch that nonstop. I watch Duncan Robinson in terms of movement off the ball, because the way that he moved, no one else uses a shooter like Miami uses him. And so if you really watch the shots that he hits, he's a top 5 shooter in the world, man. Yeah. And so, like, you can watch him. He's really interesting because he's been in that Miami system, but you watch his connection to the floor. It's really, really good. So he's somebody to watch, just in terms of being able to sprint into shots, get solid, and shoot. That's hard, man. That's really, really difficult to do. Man, there's so many different things you can take from those guys. Even if you watch them and you start to understand what I'm talking about in terms of the sequencing aspect of things, like the order in which things have to happen. Steph is going to look different from Duncan. Duncan's going to look different from Clay. Clay's going to look different from Dame. But if you really know the principles of it, you can watch those guys and you can point out exactly what those little pieces are that make them so great within the order in which things happen. I think that's the cool part to me. They're all different shooters. They all do different things, but the principles of everything is always there.
Do you have any players that kind of fascinate you who, because I see you break down Giannis's shot a good amount, which I can always appreciate. What were kind of your thoughts on that? Who are some players that kind of intrigue you when you look at like their ability to hit shots, but they're not really that good at shooters.
Certain guys have that mindset of like, I'm the best shooter in the world, even if they're nowhere close, right? You remember like Dion Waiters? Dion, I think Dion thought he was the best shooter in the world, and he can shoot like for sure,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
But like his confidence level
yeah.
was at like a sky high. Like that can't even be taught, man. That was like I watched him play. Like I watched him play and be envious of just how confident he was.
When I think of Dion, I think of shot maker. Like I know
Yes, not a shooter, right?
right. So okay, so there's it right because and I mean
Melo.
Where do you draw that line?
I think of Melo as a shooter, bro. I think highly of Melo as a. That's just a me. I was a huge Melo guy, and I think the world of his jump shot in general. So
I mean, watching Melo shoot is a pretty thing. But I don't think anybody's like, oh, Melo's a shooter, right?
True. No, true. Scorer, like more so than shooter. Yeah.
I got to watch Melo play pickup, and it was one of like the coolest things I've ever gotten to do is to watch him play in person, like a small court, and watch guys try to beat him up and guard him with all their heart, and him just laugh and smile and just do what he does. I mean, like, different level, man. Different level. One of the things that I'll say to people, like when people are like that guy can't shoot, or I'll have coaches that will send me players and they'll be like, he can't shoot. I think this is how I see it, whether right or wrong. But I said there's no bad shooters, there's only bad teachers. And so like a player that can't shoot but really wants to put in the time, they can shoot. Maybe we just haven't found the words or the way that things are going to resonate with them yet. You know what I mean? And that's where you have to be really flexible with the way that you say things and the way that you can't just do things one way. You have to be able to say one thing 1,000 different ways. It'd be so interesting to be in the gym with Giannis because I think Giannis can shoot, right? I really think that he can shoot, but there's also probably there's a huge mental component to it. It's conversations you have to have like on the personal level with players, especially that play professionally and on any level that have struggled. Like it's way more about just the physical part. Like I think that's what a lot of players don't understand, or a lot of people don't understand. Like people see a shot and be like, "Oh, I could fix that shot." It's like, man, I've been in the gym with some guys, and you think you know exactly what you need to do, and you do. Maybe you do know what you need to do, but it's so much deeper than just physically putting them in the spot. It's like sitting down and having conversations of everything that's going through their mind that's holding them back. You know what I mean? And like they need to get that out. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting when you start to get into that side of things.
Mike, what do you think of Caitlin Clark as a shooter?
Phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. I mean, I think she's cold-blooded. Cool to see that they're forcing her right and she's starting to make shots right. I didn't know what was going on for the longest time that everybody would let her go left. That didn't make a lot of sense to me at Iowa. I would have sat on that. I would have sat on that left hand all day. But seeing her start to pull up going right, even deep shots, has been impressive, man. Talk about somebody that's confident too, man. That girl lets it fly.
We love Tarassi's. Like I still to this day, like she's another one whose form I've always loved, and it's not so much the form, it's more so the release. Like, bro, she just lets that thing go. So and it's centered. Like I love the centering of her, right? Because Caitlin goes over to the left, right? She's got over to almost like a KD a little bit, right?
If her natural inclination is to bring that ball to the left, like to the left side of her body, if she's going left, that actually kind of centers things for her.
Right.
That's why I was really interested to see what she would do going right, because it's such a foreign shot line for her to have, but she's doing it.
What's it been like from your standpoint, seeing shooting kind of become more prevalent in the game?
I love it. And I think that it's one of those things that's only going to get better. Like I think shooting just will get better. And I know like you talk about Steph. I'm like, Steph's the best. Like somebody's going to come along better. There's this little girl that I've worked with. I call her little girl, but she's not. Like she's a player. McDonald's all American level play, like all that kind of stuff. Her dad found out what Steph was doing in terms of the conditioning side of things, like on how he actually works out, the VO2 max type stuff, like how he trains, all that kind of stuff. Not just went to the source and was like, give me everything you got. Like, what's it going to take? And found a guy that also specialized in it, and then has had this girl has been doing that since she was in seventh grade. So we look at Steph as like the shooter in terms of, okay, wow, amazing, amazing shot. Well, part of the reason that he's able to do what he does is because his conditioning is on like endurance athletes conditioning. And he's actually, you watch Steph, you're like, wow, it looks like he's getting stronger as he's getting older. He is. Like the way that his body's conditioned, he's going to keep getting better in terms of what he's able to do physically because of this. I say that because if there's a little girl out there that started in seventh grade and graduated high school, all this kind, and she's been doing it for that long religiously, there's other kids out there that are starting to do it. And again, not just studying the on the court, but what are you doing off the court? What is he doing mentally? What is he doing? And you start to build that up from a kid that's like in sixth or seventh grade, you're going to create a monster, man. Like,
Yeah.
because they're going to be unflappable. They're going to be in the best shape. They're going to, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that that's what's going to happen. Like, somebody's going to come along better. Like, and I'd venture to guess that he would agree with that, because I'm sure he watched players growing up and he's like, I'll be better than him. I'm gonna be a better shooter than him. You know what I mean? And I think that I think that's going to happen. I really think it's going to just get better, which is cool to me. I think it's really cool.
Why do you feel like society needs basketball?
I mean, as cliche as it is, there's so many life lessons within it. There's the teamwork aspect of it. There's the you get out what you put in aspect of it. There's the blending of cultures within it. Like so many sports, but basketball seems to have this pull to it that you find common ground with people that are very different than you. Man, I had an experience. I was working with a team in Spain, and I was working with a player that had just gotten over to where we were at in Spain from the Congo. And I'm working with this player, and before I got on the court, they were like, "Hey, just to let you know, he just got here, right? So he got here like a month ago. Um, he got over here, and they're like, he's already starting to speak Spanish. He speaks fluently in French, but he only speaks Spanish right now. So like, we don't know how this is going to go and all this kind of stuff. And I'm working with this kid, and so like, we couldn't be from two more opposite worlds, right? Like, this kid comes from nothing, man. And so like, they find him, they sign him to a contract at 15 years old, 6'8", 260 pounds, touches the top of the backboard. And we start to work with each other over the course of the week. And by the time the week ended, he's starting to speak to me in English. I talked to the owner of the team. I was like, man, I can't believe the way this kid pays attention. He said, Mike, he was like, this is everything for him. Like, if he does this, he changes the course of everything in his life, not just his life, but his family's life, right? So like, he knows that it's do or die. Like, this is what it needs to be. And I walked away from that experience being like, one, this game is absolutely, like, this game is incredible, but the impact that we all can have on it in some way can truly alter lives. To think that this game, there's a kid coming, that's families back in the Congo watching him pursue this professional career in Spain. Who knows where this kid's going to end up? Wouldn't be surprised maybe if this kid ends up in the NBA, but like, all the paths that he's going to cross along the way, the guy that found him to bring him over, I get to spend time with him. I like, all of this comes together, and like, you create this village around people that changes situations for so many people. And that's like a very extreme example, but it made me completely rethink like what I do, because it's like, wow, like, I really need to be good at what I do, because I want to be a part of that success story for him. Like, I don't want to let him down. And I think basketball is filled with stories like that. And it doesn't have to be a kid from there, right? It could be a kid here in the United States that's looking for the same thing. What can you offer somebody that will help them fulfill something that otherwise they would have never maybe been able to do, right? And that's why basketball and sports is just so beautiful to me. It connects everybody, man. It's just, there's no game like it. It's just there's something about it. It's very personal, such a personal game. The way a player plays is such a reflection of who they are too, right? So I think that's such a cool piece of it. Like no player plays the same, no player shoots the same. Like you get to leave your mark on it, and it's like the individuality of it mixing as the team and all that kind of stuff. It's the greatest, man.
Yo, Mike, I appreciate you taking the time, man. I told you, really, this meant a lot to me. I really appreciate the insight, the time, the information, the energy. You care about the game it's in your DNA. You don't just love the game. You don't just teach the game. You care about the well-being of the game. So that means a lot, bro. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you having me, man. This was awesome. Anytime I get to talk shooting and I can kind of be a nerd about it, I'm all in.
If you liked this episode of the Basketball Society podcast, I need you to go down and click like, leave us a comment, and subscribe to Basketball Society for more content, breakdowns, interviews, and episodes of the show.